I'm going to make just a quick announcement. We having a little internet difficulty downloading our packets for most of the people here. So we're getting some copies made, so we might start, well, we are going to start just a few minutes late. So it should just be a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. All right, at this time, we'll call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for May 25th, 2022. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Twait,
Here.
Vice Chair Doffett,
Here.
Commissioner Woodard. Here. Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Fikes. Here. Commissioner Halstead is absent. Commissioner Askin. Here. You have a quorum.
All right, before the agenda approval, I'm going to recommend moving a few items around. I'll read those, and then if everybody's in agreement, we'll make a motion from there. But we would like to move item H1 under new business, recommending the City Council approve resolution number 2022- yet to be determined to record a document divesting the city's interest in the deeded 30-foot right-of-way or 30-foot strip public use easement lying along the north boundary of Lot 35, Section 6, Township 5 North, Range 11 West, Seward Meridian. And then also move item G1, unfinished business, which is an action approval, recommending the Kenai City Council enact ordinance 3287-2022, conditionally donating certain city-owned property described as Tract A, Parkview Subdivision, parcel number 047010118. I think that's still the wrong number on that, or did that get corrected? I think it's a different parcel number. To the Boys and Girls Club of the Kenai Peninsula for development of facilities for youth sports, recreation, education, after-school care, and other youth activities. And then we will pick up item F1 at that point. So if everyone or anyone is in agreement, I will take a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Oh, yes, and to include a laydown. I forgot about that. That is an addition to item F1, a public comment and rezoning property petition map. With that, I would take a motion. Commissioner Askin.
I move that we approve the agenda with the changes of H1 and G1 to positions 1 and 2, and move F1 to position 3 plus the laydowns.
All right, we have a second.
I will second that.
All right, any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Motion to approve, please. Vice Chair Dothett.
I'll motion to approve as consent agenda.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item C, scheduled public comment, we have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak to an item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, nobody on Zoom?
Is there anyone on Zoom that wants to speak to something that is not on the agenda? You can unmute at this time.
I don't want to speak about anything that's not on the agenda, but I did want to discuss about the Boys and Girls Club land.
That will be heard later on in the agenda, and you can speak at that time.
Okay, perfect.
All right, seeing no one else, we will move on then. We have no consideration of plats, and then we will move item H1, recommending the Kenai City Council approve resolution number 2022-XX to record a document divesting the city's interest in the deeded 30-foot strip public use easement lying along the north boundary of Lot 35, Section 6, Township 5 North, Range 11 West, Seward Meridian. Can I get a motion, please? You don't have to read that all back. Vice Chair Dothett.
I'll make a motion for recommending of City Council approval of resolution 2022XX to record document divesting city interest in a deeded 30-foot easement.
Okay, second.
A second.
All right, staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. Staff's presentation is going to start with a familiar item to the commission, and that is on January 26, 2022, by resolution PZ 2022-02. the Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that the Kenai Peninsula Borough Planning Commission approve the preliminary plat of Kenaitze Government Lots replat. And we can see that on page 148 of the packet. That's the plat that the commission approved at that time. On February 28, 2022, the Kenai Peninsula Borough Planning Commission granted conditional approval of the subject preliminary plat. Upon further review, it was determined that while KPB Planning Commission Resolution 2013-08 approved the vacation of this 30-foot easement almost 10 years ago, that the 30-foot public use easement was still deeded to the city of Kenai. And so this is actually just a little bit of an oddity. These are government lots. They're not platted. That is what was being proposed on January 26th to the commission, is to create a plat. And it looks like this 30-foot strip of land was deeded as a use easement, many years ago, over 30 years ago, in order to provide access to these lots. It's a little unusual. That's not how easements are typically done these days. They're usually on the plats themselves. On March 3rd, 2022, the surveyor for the Kenaitze Government Lots replat requested a release of the 30-foot strip of land as deeded on deed recorded in Book 47, page 150, Kenai serial number 67-1954. There's no needed public use for the 30-foot public use easement. And we can see that on page... We can see that on page 152 of the packet. And so therefore the question before the commission is, does the commission recommend council approve the recording of a document divesting the city's interest in the deeded 30-foot public use easement lying along the north boundary of Lot 35, Section 6, Township 5 North, Range 11 West, Seward Meridian? That concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
All right. We have a motion before us. Any discussion or amendments, or I guess no amendments to this, just any discussion? Looks pretty straightforward. All right. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Dothett,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Fites,
Yes.
Commissioner Askin,
Yes.
Chair Twait,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right. Let me make sure we didn't skip anything else. All right, so we'll move on now to item G1 under unfinished business. Recommending the Kenai City Council enact ordinance 3287-2022, conditionally donating certain city-owned properties described as Lot Tract A Parkview Subdivision to the Boys and Girls Club of the Kenai Peninsula for development of facilities for youth services, recreation, education, after-school care, and other youth activities. And this was postponed from our last meeting, so we don't need a motion. We do need a motion? No. Okay. And so since it is just a carryover from that, I had recused myself. I don't think we need to go through that determination again. I will just pass the gavel to Vice Chair Dothett.
So at this previous meeting on May 11th, the gavel was passed to me as ruled that Mr. Twait recused himself from deliberation of voting on this item due to potential conflict of interest as requested. Please note that on the May 11th meeting, action was postponed until this meeting for approval on the floor. So as of that, Director Foster, can you please give us a staff report on updated information?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Dothett and fellow commissioners. The action approval item regarding the Commission's recommendation to the Kenai City Council to enact Ordinance 3287-2022 for conditional donation of city property to the Boys and Girls Club of the Kenai Peninsula for development of facilities for the youth sports, recreation, education, and after-school care was postponed from the last regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on May 11th, 2022. The Commission asked for additional information specifically for concept drawings. Those have been provided in this packet, and that can be found on page 80 to 83 of the packet. And additional information on the types of programs the Boys and Girls Club provides to the community. And starting on page 85 of the packet, there's additional information on the Boys and Girls Club. In addition, I wanted to share a little bit of additional information that was not provided at the last meeting, and that's that the zoning for 330 South Spruce Street is urban residential. This is the potential donation property. That would require a conditional use permit for the Boys and Girls Club as a use. And so the closest fitting use is actually as a daycare center in the city code. In addition, the land use classification in the comprehensive plan for this property is designated as mixed use, and I'm just going to read that definition out of the comprehensive plan. Mixed use is intended for a compatible mix of residential, retail, service, office, public, institutional, and recreational uses. Uses are co-located in an integrated way that supports sustainable forms of transport, such as public transport, walking, and biking, and increases neighborhood amenities. Compatibility issues are addressed through careful site layout and building design. And I believe that this land use classification aligns with the Boys and Girls Club project. And I'll end on the question before the commission is, does the commission recommend council approve conditionally donating city-owned land to the Boys and Girls Club? That concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
Seeing no questions at this time, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? If anybody wants to speak, let me know. They can have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the records, and we'll continue on until everyone wishes to have a time.
And I will just note that we're going to hear first from those present in chambers, and then afterwards we will move to Zoom. I see some people have their hands raised, so we will move to you after those in chambers speak.
Thank you, Chair Doffett. So the purpose for my being here is I'm the mayor of the city, Brian Gabriel, and I'm actually a co-sponsor of this ordinance along with Councilmember James Basin. At our last meeting, we were told that you had postponed this ordinance, and right off the bat, I just want to say that, you know, I would have to agree that the amount of material that was included in your packet was lacking. So I'm not casting blame for the fact that you did postpone. But here, I think we've got a good idea where we want to move tonight, and I think you've got all that information provided to you. Our hope is that you provide a recommendation of donation to the Boys and Girls Club. So just a little history of this, how we got to where we are now. Several months ago, I was asked to attend a meeting with the Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors, along with our city manager, Paul Ostrander. And as many of you were made aware, they had a $5 million donation or bequeath to them to Royce Roberts. And they were looking at finding a facility or a plan in Kenai to build their camp, well, structure. At that point, I think they were still sort of figuring out what they wanted to do. But they came across this opportunity with the care center that allows them to not burn up their entire endowment in capital costs, and allows them to buy this property and have money left over as an endowment for operating costs, which is very important to a nonprofit serving the folks that they're serving, the kids of this community. So the first plan was to see about, and there's been I think a long-term plan to move the ball fields from the Little League Park by the Catholic Church out to Section 36. And that was discussed about, maybe accelerating that plan and then being able to donate some of that property to the Boys and Girls Club. That plan is quite a ways out. It would require grant funding, and it would be, wouldn't fit with their schedule to move forward. So as we were looking at that, we looked at the portion of the south there of the property, Tract A, which the city of Kenai owns about 2.08 acres, and asked them if that would be something that would fit into their plan, or if they could make that work. And they did. They went to work and decided to try to figure out if, they wanted to build a clubhouse. They had a pretty specific idea of what they wanted to do for this facility, build a campus-like setting for the Boys and Girls Club as they, for more activities and things like that. And so that's how we got to this tract and the donation we're at now. the borough assessment on it, I think, is $28,000, and everybody can look at that, and I, myself included, say that's probably low. In fact, I agree that it is low. If you did a value or I continue. Okay.
We'll let you go on this one.
Thank you, Chair Dalton. I'm not usually on this side of there, but I appreciate the consideration. But there was I think thought of like, hey, maybe this has a higher value and ways of, if it was used for multifamily dwellings, it's nice property with a nice view and things like that. So, my feeling is this, we've got a chance to help facilitate for the Boys and Girls Club a campus facility that has 1,000 members there. So now let's talk about that for a minute. We're a view city without a view. There's very few places in Kenai that allows the general public to go enjoy a view. If you just started there and say that's something that that should be an asset to what they're trying to do there. And, and if you say, well, we're trading economic value for that, I don't agree with that either, because the majority of our revenue is raised through sales tax. And when you have an operation that brings in multiple families, week after week into the city, that's what we're trying to create for our business environment, is for people to come in here and spend money. I can't think of, and these aren't just city residents, they're from North Kenai, they're from Soldotna, they're from Sterling, from all over the Central Peninsula. So, I guess I could go debate that even more with the economic value of that. So my point being, though, is that if we're going to have a facility like that caters to the kids, why not make it something that they want to come to? This would do that. This would help them facilitate to get where they could build their campus, build out for future, and provide that service for the kids. They have 50,000 meals a year they serve. It's incredible. A few other things I wanted to touch on was, and draw your attention to section 5, 6, and 7 of the ordinance, that the Boys and Girls Club, if they're unable or otherwise, they do not obtain the adjacent parcel, which is the care center, which they are working on obtaining right now, within 1 year of the effective date of this ordinance, then the transfer of title would not occur. So we wouldn't make that transfer. There's also a revision clause in here that if there's no development occurs at tract A within 2 years of the transfer of the title, the property of the Boys and Girls Club ownership would revert to the city unless further council action is required, or taken rather. So, there again, there's certain actionable items that they have to do if we make this transfer to them. In addition to that in the event of the sale of subject property tract or any future subdivided portion thereof by the Boys and Girls Club of the Kenai Peninsula for a for-profit entity, the then current market value of the entire parcel or subdivided portion sold, whichever occurs, shall be reimbursed to the city if a sale occurs within 20 years. So we've sort of built in some safeguards to protect the city in the sense that if they move in a different direction, which I don't think they will do, and I think that this helps facilitate what they get. So what makes us attractive, again, to start with, is their ability to make a deal on the care center that already has facilities that they would use and are compatible facilities, and then actually builds this out to more campus-like setting. I want to touch on one other point here, is I know some of you have questioned the char right away. There's a right away cul-de-sac in that, and asked about vacation of that. That's not part of this. We're not asking for you to weigh in on it. That you'll get a bite at the apple if in fact this transfer takes place and then they decide to let further down the road to vacate that. That's through you. This is Planning Director Foster mentioned that if there's a CUP that's requested or filed, that goes through you. You get the bite of. So those are things that you will get another. I don't think you have to. I guess my point is you don't have to weigh in on those tonight. What we're asking for you to do, respectfully, is to approve this ordinance so that we can facilitate getting the Boys and Girls Club their campus facility within the city that would be something worthy of this city and actually draw people in. I'm kind of excited about it. And just as in closing, I'll let you know at our meeting, this place, I've been on council for 12 years, and that was the most people that were in this chamber since I've been on council. Speaking in support, we had, I think, about 10 or 12 lay down comments in support of the transfer. It's important to the community. It's not important to this community, but people from outside our community. A lot of comments from folks that don't live here requesting that we make this happen. So with that, I'll stand for questions if anybody has any.
Looks like we have no questions at this time. Is there anybody else who would wish to speak to this in chambers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mike Navarre. I live in Kenai. My address is Box 169, Kenai, Alaska. I'm on the Boys and Girls Club Board, and I thank Mayor Gabriel for this summary that he provided. Why we're here is we have an opportunity to get a cost-effective Boys and Girls Club. It's been a goal of ours for a long period of time, and you know, at the council meeting and actually before the council meeting, some of our board members were asked a number of questions about whether or not there's other alternatives, other options that could be considered, and the answer to that is absolutely. What we need, because we're under a very tight time frame from both the care center and for grants, is we need to do our due diligence, get some site plans drawn, and we can't invest that and get to where we can apply for grants until we get control of enough property so that we can have bus turnarounds and access and play areas for the kids. And the other thing is that this is not a done deal from the Boys and Girls Club standpoint. This isn't ideal for us, but it is an opportunity because we can get it at much cheaper than construction costs now. And the alternative for us is to wait until construction costs come down and then try to do a capital campaign in order to find a site that would work for us and build from the ground up. But this is an opportunity for us, something that we've desired for a long time in the city of Kenai. The grant that we got, or the bequest that we got from Royce Roberts, provided us with the funds to move forward. There's other structures that we'll likely have to build on this property. And one of the things that was asked numerous times of board members when we testified before the council is whether or not we would consider other alternatives if some of the land was surplus to our needs, because quite frankly, part of that drops off below the bluff. There may be other alternatives, so we're reasonable, and if in the course of things we can, one, determine that we want to go forward with the purchase and use that site, we're not opposed to considering other things. It's just that we can't move forward with our process unless we have the ability to quickly apply for grants and do our due diligence so that we can get drawings made, et cetera, et cetera. So it may be that at the end of the day, we'll decide that the property doesn't work for us. But we can't get even to that type of decision until we have a decision by the Planning Commission and by the council on this property. And we also had a meeting the other night to discuss this topic, and one of the things we talked about, and it makes perfect sense, if there is other alternatives, the benefit of that, of course, should go to the city. If we decide that there's surplus to our needs, obviously that land and whatever other use it could be made of it should go to the benefit of the city. So with that, I'll stand for questions. I hope that you'll consider this favorably.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Anybody else in chambers?
Hi, my name is Chris Andrews. I live at, well, as of last week, 310 South Spruce Street. If you'll notice in the packet, my house is now a parking lot. This is something that the only communication that my family has gotten about this was a letter dated March 1st from the Boys and Girls Club asking if we would be interested in selling our house. We recently purchased this back in October, and my family and I have just moved down last week. So I guess my question for people to consider is, I've now heard from 2 people about due diligence that needs to be done on this, and one of the things that I have a question about is that there's no agreement whatsoever between myself, my wife, or any other party about what would happen with our house. I know that my wife has had a conversation, I believe a single conversation to my knowledge, with somebody back in March, and the fact that we would be surrounded on 3 sides. I am not against the Boys and Girls Club moving forward with their plan. I want to make that very clear. But I do hear a lot of people saying how we have to move very quickly and we have to have due diligence. And this was literally, if someone had not stopped by my house last week and notified me that this meeting was happening, my wife and I wouldn't be here. We would have no knowledge that this was happening. So that's my point about due diligence. And I would personally like a lot more clarification on what's the plan for my property. So I don't really have anything else to add. I just wanted to bring that up to the attention of the people here when it comes to due diligence, when I hear board members saying we have to move quickly and we have to do this, we have to do all of this due diligence. I would assume that the place that they plan on making a parking lot, that would be part of the due diligence. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Where do you receive your mail?
We receive mail at 310 South Spruce. I also have a house up in Anchorage that we are in the process of selling right now. But the mail for South Spruce has always been there since October, and we have come down at least once every 2 weeks to receive the mail. So.
And have you seen any postings or anything in the nearby area?
I have not, no.
Okay.
The letter that we did receive actually went to our address up in Anchorage.
And when did you record on the property?
October, I believe it was October 4th.
And so at that time, your mailing location was in Anchorage?
No, our mailing, well, at the time it was recorded, yes, it was in Anchorage, yes.
Okay, so you had received possible notification through your Anchorage residence?
We've received mail at both locations.
Both,
So
okay. And you did receive something from the city or no?
we've never received anything from the city about this whatsoever.
Okay, thanks.
I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are you interested in considering selling, or what's your opinion on moving right now, or?
It is one of those things that my wife and I have not really had a whole lot of discussion about this. I literally just moved into my house a couple weeks ago. Still have stuff in my car. But at the same time, you know, as all humans are, you know, hey, give me a $2 million check and I'll be out tomorrow. But I mean, that's just kind of where it is. I'm just throwing that number out there, not what I'm saying. But that's just kind of where my wife and I are. This is kind of a blind side for us, and just trying to make sure what's going on.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, I'll get out of your way.
Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Next, public comment.
I'll just respond to that briefly. I was the individual that wrote the letter to these guys, and
Sorry, for a record, can you?
Jeff DeLifka, president of the Boys and Girls Club. I live in between Kenai and Salida. But I was the one that wrote the letter.
Thank you.
At the beginning of this process, we were looking at the ball fields, and about that time, because the KPCCC and the ball fields, their house is smack dab right in between that. So I wrote them a letter just asking if they were interested in selling. Didn't get a response, and then I think is your wife on the phone?
my wife's
Wife's on the phone. I didn't get a response. All of a sudden, I got a call from her, and just chatting about potentially if they were ever going to sell. And our conversation was essentially, hey, we're in the middle. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We're probably going to VRBO it this summer, but we'd love, let's reach back out, talk this winter in December, and we might be able to come to some type of an agreement. It was kind of along those lines. Today at 3:54, Sarah called me and just said, hey, we decided to move down there full time. and you know, our plans have changed a little bit, and so we're not interested in selling, which is totally fine, because we went to the other side of where the property we were asking for, and again, totally didn't mean to blindside them. I mean, we have drawings over the city of Kenai property. I mean, we're still in like very base of where we're going with this, and again, did not at all mean to blindside them in any way. I had talked to Sarah over the phone about what our potential plans were, and trying to buy that property. And again, maybe there's a misunderstanding there about whether or not they were interested in selling to us. But I got no ill intent as far as that goes. And as far as tonight's property, though, we're going the other direction from where, again, we wouldn't even necessarily need that property. It obviously would fit well, but that's kind of where it came from my end. I did write that letter to their Anchorage. I did talk to Sarah about that property, and so yeah, I just wanted to, again, no ill intent to them as far as drawing over their property or anything like that. We're just trying to figure out a campus layout that works. So I apologize for the miscommunication.
Oh, no, I was on the road at 4 o'clock, so.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had do we have a question for Mr. DeLuca?
So with that testimony, how does that impact your parking plan then?
I think we can go the other direction. Again, without that there, I don't think that's necessarily the deal breaker for us. If they're not willing to sell, again, I still think we can go, if the property was donated, we still got 2 acres, possibly again vacating the right of way. We can kind of move things around a little bit as far as that goes. So I don't think that's necessarily a deal breaker. Yes, sir.
Have you guys looked at, you said you were considering that you could look at other alternative properties. Have you looked at other alternative properties at all?
We've been approached by other people that are wanting us to come there. We have not done any due diligence or looked. We've been solely putting all of our energy into this. But there are definitely people. Obviously, when you people hear about the amount of money we have, they're like, hey, this would be a good idea. This is a good idea. This is a good idea. But we've been solely focused on trying to make this project work. And so that's where our heart has been to this point. There's been no, again, other discussions, due diligence, laying of plans for anywhere else other than that facility.
Thank you.
With the chair's permission, can I kind of co-testify and expand a little bit on some of those questions?
If it's going to work on these questions, but we'll you need your name and for the records, please.
Yes, sir. Kyle Cornellis, I'm the board secretary and treasurer. 705 Frontage Road. I just wanted to add this kind of speaks to the early nature of our request, right? We've got some very early conceptual drawings. We can't promise that's where the parking lot is going and the new clubhouse. You know, this kind of speaks to the fact, the reason why we are requesting the city parcel in its entirety donated to us, so that it enables us to go through the tried and true process of project delivery, right? Schematic design, programming, what exactly services are we going to be providing, and where do they go, and what size buses, and how many folks at summer school and stuff like that. So I think this is a good example of the preliminary nature of our project. Unfortunately, hurried a bit with the fact that we have this opportunity to purchase the care center itself. We know for certain that the care center parcel by itself is inadequate. The project can't move forward. So we require additional space, significant more than is even around it. The 2-acre parcel is going to be challenging in its own. If there is opportunity to, obviously we work in good faith with the city, and if there are opportunities to subdivide, give some back in due process, we'll figure that out, and we work in good faith with the city. So in this case, we'll be great neighbors, and we'll work closely with our neighbors, including across Spruce and everywhere, and the park across the gully. So we just need to understand our constraints, and this is one of them. If P&Z and council chooses not to donate that parcel, that 2.09 acres, then we know our path forward, and we'll kind of reassess and figure out, what we can and can't do to accomplish our dream club.
So currently this is zoned for a rural residential zoning, is that correct? Or suburban?
I think it is urban.
Urban?
The property in question is The property for the donation is urban, the current care center is suburban.
Okay. So I guess my question is the impact and the land donation. I absolutely understand the impact that would have for the community. I'm just curious, how does that blend in with the rest of the community's uses for down in that area? So obviously something of that size and that nature with the bus turnarounds, with the increased use down there, the people added to it, the cars, the traffic. Is there any consideration for the city during dip netting season or any other uses? Is there a concern there, I guess, is my question? Possibly for staff.
Staff?
Thank you, Vice Chair Douthit, Commissioner Fikes. That would be something a conditional use permit, would be required at a later stage to move forward, and that could be a consideration for that review criteria for a conditional use permit. And so that would be something that could become in front of the commission at a later date.
I guess on that point, I could, as far as the dip netting goes, I'd heard rumor of possibly working with moving where the check-in was. If the city manager could speak to that, maybe if he knows more about that to answer that question, maybe a little bit fuller.
Sure. Thanks, Vice Chair Douthit. So yeah, obviously the current configuration of our fee shack on Spruce Street there does create a congestion area, particularly if you talk about an entity like the Boys and Girls Club moving into that area. The city would work, and to use the same term that Mr. Cornelis used, we work in good faith with the Boys and Girls Club to attempt to move that fee shack to the bottom of the hill, which is something that we've considered for a couple of years, not only because of the Boys and Girls Club, but because of the Lee Shore Center that's there. The Catholic Church is on Spruce Street as well, so there's a lot of good reasons to move that shack to the bottom of the hill. It would ease up that congestion, not only for this potential development, for other folks in that area, including this gentleman that just bought his house there. It's going to be a nightmare in July for him with the fee shack there. And also in response to the earlier question about the development there and what impacts that might have on the surrounding neighborhood, I would reiterate what Mr. Foster said when he introduced this to you, is that if you look at the comprehensive plan, that area the land use is designated as mixed use, which this development fits perfectly into that mixed use designation that's in the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan that the city adopted in 2016 does clearly support this type of use in that area.
Thank you. Any other questions for either the individual that was testifying or staff? Doesn't look anybody else wishing to testify to this from the public? It's in quarters. Seeing none, I guess we'll go to Zoom.
All right. If there's anyone on Zoom that wants to testify to the Boys and Girls Club donation, we'll hear first from Sarah Andrews.
Hi, my name is Sarah Andrews. That was my husband who just spoke a few minutes ago. I'm the one who talked to Jeff a couple of times about it. Like he said, we bought the house in October, and I heard from Jeff in March. And we had talked, we weren't sure what we were going to be doing at that point. We were still trying to figure out our plans and everything. Selling the house is not necessarily off of the table. It's just right now we're definitely living there. In the future, it's a possibility. But my biggest concern really is when this happens, or I guess if this happens, is how is it going to affect our property value and things like that with if they're putting in a parking lot. And like, if you look in our backyard right now, one of the things I loved about it is it has that green belt there next to the ball fields and stuff. And I don't mind the ball fields. That's great. I can hear kids play all day long. That's totally great with me. And I'm totally a fan of the Boys and Girls Club as well. They do a lot of good for a lot of communities. But I'm hopeful that if this moves forward, even if they don't need our property, that the green belt, the trees that are right there and everything that made me fall in love with the backyard there, I'm hoping that that's not all going to get chopped down and paved over, and I'm not sure how that could be done, but I just wanted to voice my concerns about that and what that could potentially do to our property value there too, in case we don't wind up selling to the Boys and Girls Club, but we may end up selling down the road. I don't know how that would affect things.
And if I might, Sarah, I can speak to that. When they do a large-scale plan like this, there will be a site plan. And a lot of those times, the recommendations that even if they do decide to build a larger scale facility there, some of the site plans that can be considered is that they would have to plant trees or keep a certain amount of vegetation along the fence lines and the bordering of other properties.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Sarah. And anybody else on Zoom?
All right, Christine, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, it's Christine Schmidt. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I will just sort of repeat the points that I gave to you a couple of weeks ago. First of all, the city doesn't have a neutral process to evaluate requests for donations of city property. And the ad hoc process for those requests is often not a fair process, especially for nonprofits. And I think this request is in that category. There are a lot of worthy nonprofits in this community, including the Boys and Girls Club. And it seems to me that the other organizations should be, if the city's going to be donating land right and left, other organizations should be given an opportunity to have the same consideration. Second, the 2 acres is a prime piece of city land. The Boys and Girls Development Plan looks pretty much like there's going to be just a parking lot on the 2 acres. That will be, of course, closed to the public except for Boys and Girls Club members. And so that is not the highest and best use for this property. It is an ideal location for some kind of mixed housing, such as condos, housing which our community needs very much right now. And also, once you take property like this out of the public out of private hands, you know, there will not be the economy of it. They won't be paying for the property. They won't be paying taxes on it. So the city will lose that revenue. And I just want to remind you once again that when residents of our city ask the city to set aside buffer lots to protect the quality of life for residential subdivisions, we're always told, well, you need to buy the property. For example, with Lawton Acres, Walker Lane, my own neighborhood, Woodland Subdivision along Float Plain Road. And I guess I would just say that these nonprofits can buy the property just like we're being told. And also, why does the city not look at a lease as an option for this property? Because at least that way the city could have some input into the development. But once it's donated, it's gone from the possibility of any kind of public use forever. And, you know, sure, we hear that, if there's land surplus to our needs, we'll give it back to the city. But that's not a legal or written commitment. That's why a lease would be better in my opinion, for the situation where the city could sort of, you know, hold on to it till the Boys and Girls Club sees what their real plan is. It's very premature to just say, yeah, we're going to donate this property to you and really be tied down to and committed to do so no matter what. So I guess I would just say that I would hope, you know, I know that, you know, these sorts of things are very difficult because there's a lot of, you know, support for the community, for the Boys and Girls Club, and I totally get that. But, you know, there needs to be some concern for the rest of the residents of this community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom wishing to speak to this?
If there's anyone else on Zoom that wants to speak to the Boys and Girls Club land donation, you can unmute at this time.
Doesn't look like it. No? Any other questions from the commission? Seeing no one else is wishing to speak to this, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion for commissioners. Anybody wanting to say anything or commission? No? Okay. Oh, Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, I think this looks like a really good plan, and I think it really looks like it would be something that would benefit the Boys and Girls Club and it would benefit the community, but it sounds like there's just a lot of due diligence we have to do. That still has to be done. And some of that due diligence includes finding out if there's other interests or other folks that would qualify for this piece of land, because there might be, and there might be other interests. I don't know if we could build in some sort of a due diligence process. I realize it's a fast thing that needs to happen, but I think we need to find out what the rest of the community thinks about this. Are there other nonprofits that would be interested in this? Because, I mean, this could set a precedent of just, you know, somebody shows up pretty quickly and says, we need something, and, you know, is that how we're going to be donating land? I don't know if that's, I don't know if the process is at this point that well resolved that, you know, we're confident we're not, we're making a rush decision. So I would be apt to think we want to do some outreach and see if other folks would be interested in this land. It's a prime piece of property in a very high used area.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I just wanted to speak on this a little bit. So after the last meeting, we postponed this to this meeting to be able to reach out and be able to do some more digging into things, give more information, and I think we've been given more information. So after kind of digging into some of the weeds on this property, I just kind of like to take my bite at it and my recommendations. So with my recommendation to council would be in this is not to approve as written. However, I do believe that we can make this work with the city and the Boys and Girls Club. I would recommend that we could subdivide the parcel into question and then allow the remainder to be sold at a competitive bid process for future possible development, like it is stated in the mixed land use. If and it's also is what it's zoned for. If Boys and Girls Club feels they need more land, then the city could consider making new parcels on the land to the northwest of the ball fields. There's a large parcel there, at least an acre or better, of land that could be replatted for this other uses. How would we do this? You know, I think what would take place is, even as we were brought up at the last meeting, council could make an amendment to this, and I think it could read something similar to a minimum of 2 acres. And as the Boys and Girls Club has stated, they're still in influx. So as long as they can get at least 2 acres, and I think if we could just take out that particular parcel specifically and to say a minimum of 2 acres of land, we could still approve this and move on like it is. And that would be kind of my consideration, is that then we'd be able to work with maybe modifying that a little bit. And even the land management plan talks about that parcel to the northwest as being ready to be replatted. Making that amendment would just state simply a minimum of 2 acres. They realistically might be able to give them more, and if they need more, we could adjust the plat as needed as this process move on, and then they could at least have over 6 acres of land to work with for their future plans. It's zoned urban residential and would require a CUP, which we can take care of as we move on and as we know more with the road right-of-ways and those issues. Would need to be vacated. We looked into those, and like I said, that would come up at a later point. Right now, what comes into is how much land they need, and they're saying they need at least that minimum of 2 acres, so we could clarify that with a minimum of 2 acres. Then we could play with the borders, and both people would have some land to work with. The current building has a CUP for the Care Center, so being able to roll into another CUP I don't think is going to be that big of an issue. If we grant the donation, these issues will come back to us at a later date as far as getting a CUP and the road right-of-ways. I was able to walk the property, and you know, one of the conditions is, like I said, looking at what's coming into the future, possibly with that road vacation. There was that far in piece that might get landlocked, but I walked it, and that's not even usable. So vacating that property, I don't think, or vacating that road right-of-way shouldn't be too big of an issue. Why do I think this? Well, this land has amazing potential. I don't know if anybody else got a chance to walk around on it. It's actually been recently surveyed, so you can see exactly where the lines are. It gives you a really good idea of what the layout is. It's surprising level, good quality land. The land has good potential for residential use, has views, and is perfect level. It's also good use for the Boys and Girls Club. is zoned residential use. So at some point, the city in our history has felt that they should be residences living there and on that property. I believe it's not. I believe that this has been brought up that it hasn't sold yet. Well, I think that comes to just a lack of people having knowledge that they can realistically choose to try to purchase any property that the city has, not just this particular land in particular. It was brought up about economic value, that the sales tax from people coming into the Kenai and Boys and Girls Club, and that's true. Then there's going to be a large economic value for that, but also there's an economic value for housing, and that's why I think being able to work with both of these at the same time could prove lucrative for the city. Housing brings in property tax values and city services values, but they also bring the people that live and work in the city, and most likely year-round, not just for the seasonal sports and here and there and the people coming and going, but these people are going to live here and work here in the city. They're going to pay city year-round taxes. Their children could attend schools here. The children will probably attend the Boys and Girls Club, especially if they live that close. This area is a residential, not the area in question also was brought up as Spruce in general, being non-residential, and it doesn't really fit that. Well, it is have residences there. We spoke to one. There's one resident that lives right next to there that wishes to remain a residence at this time anyway. The church itself has a house that the fathers live there, so that's another house. The Lee Shore Center is across the street, and it's a short-term residence. So there are residents there, and I think that we could see a mixed use come out of this in that area. I don't want to see this not go anywhere. I just think my recommendation, I guess, of all this would be that we could recommend that we add a whereas or change it slightly to that we donate a minimum of 2 acres to the Boys and Girls Club, and that we can adjust the land barriers however. So we can still, I think with that amendment, we could still move forward with this. We could still on the tame line, and we got a minimum of 2 acres. That's not saying we're only going to give 2 acres. That would be a minimum of 2 acres, and I think we could probably squeeze out more than that. Just from my playing with it, just a little bit of playing, I saw at least 2.5 acres. If you count the acre up there and an acre and a half there, and like I said, you guys Boys and Girls Club has testified themselves that it's all in influx as far as where their parking lot's going to be. But that's where I'm at on that. I would push that we could make amendment possibly for recommendation would be a minimum of 2 acres instead of just staying this exact lot. And it was long-winded, but I've had a lot of digging to do. Anybody else?
Thank you, Vice Chair Dothan. I just wanted to provide some information just for the commissioners' information in regards to Commissioner Greenberg's comments about donation to nonprofits. For historical perspective, this commission and the council has approved the donation of land to KPHI, Habitat for Humanity, Triumvirate, and the Peninsula Performers all in the last 6 years. So it's not without precedent that we do donate to nonprofits. I would also like, as far as Vice Chair Dothan's comments, I would be curious from the Boys and Girls Club if that commitment from the city would give them sufficient site control to allow them to pursue grants. It could be that they need that tract or some designated tract to be identified before they could be eligible to apply for these grants, which I know those deadlines are coming up. I just wanted to provide that information.
And I guess I could ask the Boys and Girls Club, with that, if we were to say something, a minimum of 2 acres of adjoining land, would that be something you could still work with as far as, and like I said, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying we could, as you know, this is an influx, would saying that you're going to have over 6 acres to work with, and then because already right now we're talking about going over a road right, we're talking about going into a road easement on Spruce, possibly over the, needing some land over by another house if future. Would 2 acres be a suffice, if we say as a minimum?
Well, just introduce myself. My name's Chris Hoff. I'm at 35555 Van Dyke, and I'm a board member as well. Did you want to start, or?
I was just, no, I'll let you, this is your area of
Well,
expertise,
I was going to say,
mine.
I also own a couple title companies, Stewart Title, the Kenai Peninsula in Soldotna, and Kachemak Bay Title Agency in Homer. So I'm fairly, familiar, at least the part that my companies contribute to the process. So that idea, if we had a couple years for our timeline, then that would make a lot of sense. But donating a piece of property that doesn't exist that doesn't work for us. That doesn't work for a plan, doesn't work for financing. It doesn't allow us to describe what our project is. If we're applying for a grant or a loan or any financing, we would be the Kenai Cares facility, the legal description that is on, as well as the parcel adjoining it, which is what we're requesting in that ordinance. My company certainly wouldn't be able to insure, and a lender would not be able to loan on the parcel that has the Kenai Cares facility and for lack of better terms, an imaginary legal description of a potential portion of this lot and a potential portion of the other lot. So I don't think that would work. And you know, I certainly understand your guys' desire to make it work for everybody, or to, you know, get a bunch of different, you know, kill lots of birds with one stone. I don't see how that could work, at least the way you proposed it.
So on that question, so you would need the purchase that the land that you're purchasing is the Kenai Care Center, right?
Right.
So that's what you would be getting a loan or getting land on. By the time you purchased and closed and went through that process, you still have a schematic. Before any construction was done, you'd have to have a plan on what you're going to have and engineering and what you need. By that time, wouldn't we have time to possibly figure out the exact land area you would need based on the plans you would have?
I mean, I know many of us and many of you individually and personally have been through the platting process and re-subdivided property, and it can be very lengthy. So I don't see how you could expect any business, either nonprofit or for-profit, to operate under those conditions that you're putting forth.
From a project delivery perspective, you know, just and many of you are aware of this on P&Z, you know, additional complexities or conditions, they all have an impact to delivering a project, and this would too. You know, as previously testified, it doesn't work as it exists. We need maximum flexibility, and you know what we need from P&Z and council is whether or not it's in the city's best interest to donate the land, and we're okay with the decision, whatever it may be.
Correct.
You know, we don't envy you having to make the tough decisions, but we respectfully just request that you make that decision, and we'll live with the answer.
So you stated earlier that you was a complete influx and the plans weren't set in stone anywhere. You weren't sure you were going to need the 2 acres or not. Wouldn't that be something you could decide as you design your plans as to how much land you would need as far as purchasing the property? I mean, they're looking at what timing frame are you would be looking at getting the construction just on the facility you're looking at now? I know there was a list of things that had to be done on just that facility. What's the time frame for demobbing the houses and redoing the floor and redoing the general facility that is just the heart of the facility before new construction would start?
Commissioner Doffett, through the chair, or I guess you are the vice chair, we don't have answers to those, and we didn't have them 2 weeks ago, and we don't have them today. I can't guarantee you when and what it's going to look like. I can tell you that it's 4.26 acres with an adjoining 2.09, of which over an acre is probably on a steep slope. You know, so we're looking at 5.3 acres, which is a stretch for what we want our forever home to look like at our campus in Kenai. So, like Mr. Navarre testified, it's not a done deal at this juncture. Even if it is conditionally donated to the club, as we go through the process, it may not work out. And you know, per the ordinance, you know, if we're unable to purchase the care center within 1 year, it reverts back to the city of Kenai. If we don't develop it within 2 years, it reverts back to the city of Kenai. So, you know, we're just simply asking for the city to donate that land conditionally, and if we don't follow through, then it goes back to the city for its highest and best use or whatever is decided amongst the bodies. So I can't answer some of those specific questions because we don't know. We're just asking for the ability to go through the process, and as you're aware, there's an enormous amount of time and money and energy that it takes to go through a capital project delivery, and the risk is too great to the club. We have important important functions and job duties to attend to that are our core focus and objective. So, like I said, we're just simply asking for that parcel in its entirety, and if that doesn't work out, no hard feelings. We'll continue our great relationship with the city of Kenai as we have in the past, and, you know, we're going to be going in the future for a long time.
Sorry, I know you're working through some grant processes for future development and stuff. Would the process be hindered by stating that you're in negotiations with exact land donation for the city, from the city? Is that what we're getting at?
In my experience, absolutely. In my professional experience, I do this for a living over at the city of Soldotna, and site control is enormously important in any grant application or grant process. In my experience. Yes.
Thank you. Have somebody down there, Mr. Greenberg.
What do you think would be a reasonable time frame for you to be able to make sure that you can get this done?
We did have the opportunity to work closely with the administration and the mayor, as previously testified. The resulting ordinance that had the enormous support and outpouring has those conditions in there, and we believe that we're able to meet those conditions.
I was just wondering if
Your mic's not on.
sorry, in our due diligence, if we just gave other folks the opportunity to look at it and say, make sure nobody else is interested in it, you know?
That's a decision for you guys, not us.
Yeah, so as a condition, it's a very valuable piece of property. It's a view property. Don't have a lot of those, you know? I think it would be prudent to just allow it to be out so we can get some comment and say, does anybody else interested in this land? Nobody's interested in this land. What period of time is appropriate for that? That would allow this to continue. And then we could go with clear conscience saying, nobody else wants this. You know, this is great. We're going to be able to donate this without any reservations.
I think I can, from previous meetings, it's pretty time sensitive. From the sounds of it, there was kind of a hardship even for us to delay it from the last meeting to this meeting for our decision. So from my understanding, it's kind of a now or never kind of deal. But if the Boys and Girls Club can just talk to this, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, no new testimony there. The urgency is high. For Commissioner Greenberg, Mr. Tunset testified that really the two driving factors is this enormous gift from Royce Roberts and his family, coinciding with the care center closing up their doors at the fiscal year of June 30th. So those are the two driving factors of why we're here today.
Yeah, I can absolutely appreciate the need for the facilities, and I absolutely understand the testimony that you've provided, as well as what the staff has added to. And so for those reasons, I'll be voting for the recommendation for the city. I appreciate everybody's input, and it's helped to better understand the commitment of the city in the process and better understand the applicant's need for what might feel like a perception of being rushed, but a need to satisfy the grant requirements. And so for those reasons, I feel comfortable in going ahead and recommending it to the council for their further decision.
Any other comments, questions, commissioners? Guess we'll hold off until Mr. Twait gets back.
No.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I too will approve it, in my opinion. I think we need to do a lot more for our youth in this area. And as the mayor said, it will bring revenue to the city. And I will vote yes.
Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Greenberg.
Is it possible to put a condition for 2 weeks, to say 2 weeks will allow people to say if they're interested in it, and at that point we can...
For staff on this, is there, kind of like with our CPUs, is there a waiting period of any kind for contesting or anything like that? I don't think there is.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dothett and Commissioner Greenberg. There isn't. In city code for conditional donations, there aren't. Actually, what Commissioner Greenberg is speaking to, we do have provisions for in Title 22 of city code for competitive land purchases. And that does have that process where there's a notification put out there for 30 days to see if there's competing applications. There isn't guidance when it comes to conditional donations to provide that kind of process. And potentially a reason for that can be that in the time that I've been here, and this is the third conditional donation, KPHI, Triumvirate, and now the Boys and Girls Club, it does appear that to be nimble for these types of requests is a real asset to the process, especially with the having that ordinance, in hand to move forward to develop their project. There's still a lot of steps to get this project to the end, but this is an important one to allow an applicant to move forward.
Just as a follow-up through Vice Chair Dothett, so this meeting was notified through the public, as was our past meeting when we postponed it. And if it is approved and moved on to the council, that will also be notified through the public and might possibly be another opportunity for anyone in the community or any other nonprofits to step forward at that time. Is that also possible?
Sure. Through the Vice Chair and Commissioner Fikes. This isn't a public hearing, so there is a difference in that this is a planning and zoning meeting for an action approval item. So I did want to be clear that it was not notified as a public hearing item within the 300 feet, because it is that the commission is just providing that recommendation and not adjudicating on this. But certainly, and as we found at both council and here at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we have gotten that type of participation and testimony from the community to weigh in on it.
And just for clarification, no matter what our recommendation is, it still goes to the city council for final vote. It doesn't stop here.
Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. So I guess at this time, we will send it for a vote.
Commissioner Woodard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes?
Yes.
Commissioner Askin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dothett?
No.
Motion passes.
Mr. Twait, I believe you can come back now.
All right. I'll ask
Chair
if
Twait?
we'll let the Boys and Girls Club people
Mr.
vacate
Twait.
here. We should make them stay, maybe, huh?
Yeah, got one more thing.
Mr. Chair, can we have a brief at ease, please?
Yep. I was just going to ask if we want to take a quick Eddie, so we'll take a 5-minute if we can do it in 5. Thanks.
They took it before the truck building was built here. See, you've been embarrassed at cheating. And we were just talking with Parcels. Now you're gonna grab over there. It's back and it's built into the house.
Okay, we are back on the record. Now we'll move to item F1, public hearings. We have one before us tonight, Resolution PZ 2022-12, an application for the rezoning of parcels in Basin View Subdivision, Ames Road, and Beaver Loop Road from rural residential to rural residential 1. Application submitted by Jerry Huff, 765 Ames Road, Kenai, with a petition of a majority of the property owners in the area to be rezoned. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Askin.
I move that we approve Resolution 2022-12.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, staff report. No. Staff report first? Where am I at here? I should have looked at my notes.
Got a cheat sheet.
Why,
Staff
take
report
away
first.
the gavel for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. While Megan's getting the PowerPoint up, staff's presentation is Resolution PZ 2022-12. This is a rezoning application for rural residential zoning district to rural residential 1 zoning district. Thank you. The applicant is Jerry C. Huff, and the legal description, property address, and parcel numbers you can actually find in the packet, along with a map of the rezoning boundary in greater detail, which does include 74 parcels. The existing zoning for all parcels within the boundary is rural residential. The current land use, it's actually, there's several different land uses, though primarily residential. And then the land use plan is for low density residential. I did want to note that the applicant provided an intended reason for the rezoning, and that is 1, to protect the rural open quality of the residential neighborhood, 2, to preserve the residential character of a low-density neighborhood environment, 3, maintain the value of property, both monetary and non-monetary, quality of life for residents' use and enjoyment of the property, and 4, consistent with the city comprehensive plan, specifically protect the livability of the existing neighborhood. The zoning code amendments may be initiated by a submission of a petition by a majority of the property owners in the area for consideration if the area is to be rezoned. Contains a minimum of 1 acre, which this is well above 1 acre, and unless the amendment enlarges an adjacent district boundary, so that's actually not applicable in this case. It's well above an acre, and the petition of majority of the property owners, there were signatures from 46 property owners, so that was the 62%. So meeting that threshold for a majority. The subject area proposed to be rezoned consists of parcels on Dolchek Lane, Cub Court, Kim and Ang Court, Basin View Way, Ames Road. Let me go back back here. Ames Road south of Beaver Loop Road and parcels on the south side of Beaver Loop Road from Ames Road to Dolchek Lane. And again, bring your attention to the rezoning boundary map. The rural residential and rural residential 1 zoning districts have the same intent per KMC 142080 rural residential zones. They're actually grouped together, these 2 zoning districts, under rural residential in the code. The intent of the rural residential zone, both rural residential and rural residential 1, is to provide for low-density residential development and outlying in rural areas in a form which creates a stable and attractive residential environment. The specific intent in establishing this zone is 1, to separate residential structures to an extent which will A, preserve the rural open quality of the environment, and B, prevent health hazards in areas not served by public water and sewer, and 2, to prohibit uses which would violate the residential character of the environment, and B, generate heavy traffic in predominantly rural areas. Continuing with staff's analysis. Per KMC 142410, minimum lot area requirements, they are slightly different between the rural residential and the rural residential 1, in that rural residential 1 does not allow for 5 or more dwelling units, and it can have up to 4 dwelling with a conditional use permit. And then the RR1 requirements for minimum lot size is 22,400 square feet, as opposed to rural residential, which is 20,000. So there's a 2,400 square foot difference. I just say that those are pretty minute differences between those 2 zoning districts for the minimum lot area requirements. Development requirements for rural residential and rural residential 1 are identical per KMC 142420 general requirements. We can see here everything from minimum lot width, all the setbacks, front, side, rear, and so on are identical. There are 2 primary differences between the rural residential and rural residential 1 zoning districts as identified in KMC 142210 land use table. 1, there are more principal permitted uses allowed in the rural residential district with a total of 6 than the RR1 district with a total of 4. In principle, meaning that it's the primary use of the property, and permitted meaning that you don't need to ask for special permission for that particular use. And then 2, there are more opportunities for conditional use permit applications in the rural residential district with a total of 55 opportunities for a conditional use permit application to be submitted in the rural residential district. As opposed to rural residential 1 district has a total of 20. It's actually pretty significant difference between the 2. I wasn't going to go into the detail of the land use table itself, but that is provided on page 39 of the packet, where rural residential and rural residential 1 are next to each other in the table. And so therefore, if somebody cared to look further into conditional uses, principal uses, and so on, that'd be the place to look those up. Existing conditional use permits. There are 2 existing conditional use permit properties in the area proposed for rezoning. There is a bed and breakfast and guide service at 909 Ames Road, and a welding and metal framing business at 911 Ames Road. And there's a map in the packet showing the location of both of those. A bed and breakfast is a conditional use in the rural residential 1 district, and therefore would be a conforming use if this parcel was to be rezoned. If the rezoning application is approved, existing conditional use permits for the guide service at 909 Ames Road and fabrication facility at 911 Ames Road would be considered non-conforming uses per KMC 142050, which is references non-conforming lot structures and uses. And those uses are not permitted in rural residential 1. Again, the fabrication facility and guide service would not be permitted, but they exist now. So we're going to go in a little bit of detail what a non-conforming use is and how it impacts these two properties. Non-conforming uses are unable to expand or move the non-conforming use from existing state on the lot without a conditional use permit granted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And specifically in code, the Planning and Zoning Commission may grant a conditional use permit allowing a non-conforming use to expand, enlarge, or increase in intensity. So it does essentially freeze these two conditional use permits in place. It says that you can't make any changes to them, with the exception that if you did look to, let's say, expand one of those two uses, it is required to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval via conditional use permit. So there is a path forward for potential change for both the guide service and the fabrication use. The existing conditional use permits would still be transferable to a new property owner per KMC 1420-150 I-5. And so that would still allow that permit to be transferred to any new owners who would potentially purchase the property. Comprehensive plan analysis. The land use plan from the 2016 comprehensive plan proposes a low-density residential land use for this neighborhood. The parcels proposed rezoning have a similar land use, lot size, and orientation, individual on-site water supply and wastewater disposal systems, and low-density development with no sidewalks. The 2016 Imagine Kenai 2030 City of Kenai Comprehensive Plan supports this rezoning in Goal 1, Quality of Life, to promote and encourage quality of life in Kenai. Q4, promote the siting and design of land uses that are in harmony and scale with surrounding uses. And a rezoning to RR1 would align with the current low-density residential character of the neighborhood. Recommendations. Staff finds the rezone request per the rezoning boundary map attachment B from the rural residential zone to the rural residential 1 zone is suitable for an approval recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Kenai City Council. That concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
All right, at this time, we will allow the applicant to come forward and give a presentation of anything he would like and maybe add on to anything that Planning Director Foster had. So please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jerry Huff. I live at 765 Ames Road. Everybody calls me Rusty. I've lived there for 30 years. Lived in the neighborhood for 35. The main reason we're here tonight, these are my neighbors, is we're trying to protect our neighborhood from any more businesses that create more traffic that have an impact on our livability and enjoyment of our property. And we live on Beaver Creek, which is a highly desired area for fishing and guiding. And we're trying to kind of draw a line between our neighborhood and some other properties that are further closest to the river. But our main focus here is to protect our neighborhood for what it is, a residential neighborhood, and to narrow down the conditional use opportunities in this area from 50 to 20, which is, you know, quite a bit. There's still a lot of opportunity there, but what this does is it kind of draws a line for the high use, high traffic type businesses, which we call guide services, bed and breakfast, lodges, and so on. Nobody here is opposed to business. We've all made our living in business here in the neighborhood, and we're all good neighbors. I haven't found anybody in the neighborhood that's opposed to this petition. I tried to put it together pretty quick because I wanted to get it on the agenda. I know I could get a lot more signatures here. I've talked to a lot of more people. Some people were out of town, but I've talked to at least one of the conditional use operators and he's not opposed to this, and I know my neighbors have talked to the guide service folks that own that, and they're not opposed to this petition as well. They want to protect their area for what it is and to keep it the way it is. So when I put this together, I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to cut anybody's throat in that regard. I mean, we want these people to continue to do what they do. They've been good neighbors, and so that's kind of where we're at here. I don't know what else I could add to the presentation. I think that's about all I've got.
All right. Well, what we'll do is let you sit back down. We'll get anybody else that wants to testify, and then give you an opportunity at the end if you have anything you want to refute or add to. So, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, at this time we'll open it up to public testimony. I don't know. We were worried that we'd be here till 1 o'clock. I don't see that being a problem, but we're still going to try to stick to the 3 minutes. If you have a thought that's getting close to 3 minutes, you got a clock you can see. I see one. We'll just finish it up as best you can. And then I'm going to guess that's going to be a pretty repetitive theme probably for the most part. So maybe the next person will finish up a thought maybe that you were thinking of. So at this point in time, anyone wishing to come forward and testify to, I don't have it in front of me again, whatever one it is. How about that? PZ 2022-12. Yep, come forward.
All right, and for those on Zoom, just to clarify, we're going to first go by who is signed up here in chambers, or no, we're just gonna go.
Yeah, we're gonna wing it because he actually is the first one on the list, so we
right.
haven't got out of line yet. But
We're
not
gonna
that many
hear
people
from
signed
those
up
in
here, so
chambers first,
we're just
and-
gonna kind of wing
Let me
it.
go
So
ahead?
And then we'll
go ahead.
on
Yep.
Zoom.
Okay. My name's Chuck Eubank. I live at 3050 Kiminang Court in Basin View Subdivision. We've been there for 39 years. We were conveyed our subsurface rights, mineral rights. We have completed all the permits on all of our structures on our property. We have an existing dock on Beaver Creek that is permitted. We have no junk on our property except good junk, okay? And in our retired years, we've tried to buy sun in the wintertime. The trouble in the subdivision in the past 39 years, Basin View, next door owner tried to start a dog team. That wasn't in accordance with the Kenai animal control. They needed a kennel permit and couldn't get one. We finally went to the circuit court, and it was turned down, and he had to move his dog. I had an animal control program. My dog, it was reported that it was eating bird seed, and it was caught in a trap. So I had to go get her out of the trap. In 2021, our subdivision was united, and were successful in rejecting a guide operation, bed and breakfast, on a lot within the subdivision. The action taken was possible due to the covenant's restrictions, and it protected our subdivision's single-family dwelling requirements of no commercial businesses. Now rezoning in less than 2 years, two major problems. The proposed rezoning will not only affect Basin View subdivision, but selected adjoining subdivisions. I see that the map goes clear down into about 3 or 4 different subdivisions. Is that correct? I mean, when I asked about the subdivisions that were affected, when I asked the city last week, they said they didn't have enough room on their card to put it on there, so they didn't list all subdivisions. Okay. What has, I'm
Your
sorry?
staff want to respond to that, sir?
You gotta let.
Go ahead. What has caused the rezoning? Basic thing is caused the rezoning is non-enforcement of conditional use permits and non-enforcement of the city ordinances. An individual whom has no residence in Basin View subdivision, only a piece of land, of which I believe will never be built on, has came door to door, Basin View subdivision, with questionable information against guide businesses and conditional use permits, of which he has stated he dislikes both. Okay. His actions included placing a sign on an electrical pole on Ames Road, referencing speed of vehicles and children at play. Even though the city has postponed speed signs on Ames, this reminds me of the Cooper Landing I used to go through, and they had 35-mile-an-hour speed signs on every corner. Okay? When people take this type of action in a subdivision that they don't live in, okay, I believe that shouldn't happen. They shouldn't come in our subdivision. Our covenants and our ordinances has protected us as property owners in that subdivision. So now when we get into what will cause the rezoning cause? No business in the subdivision, okay? And when I'm talking about a business, I'm talking about something that generates income for people. During the COVID, there's several people that have had to go home to operate their business. So now, is that going to move all of them out of there? Do they have to have a conditional use permit? What do they need to operate their business with? So the more restrictions we put on people, I'm not a restriction person. I believe if you have a restriction, then it should be enforced. There's plenty of lines in our covenants and in the city's ordinance to cover activities. If these activities are allowed to go on, that is offensive to property owners, then they should have something to say about it. As you can see,
I'm gonna stop you there, and we're gonna have some questions, and you can probably answer a lot of them, and maybe if you're crafty, tie in more of what you want to talk about. So anyone have any questions? Somebody better. Vice Chair Dothett.
I guess I just have a quick question. I think it was asked during your testimony. Do we have a rough estimate on it, or even a ballpark of how many subdivisions are in this chunk of land that's been?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Dothett. Yeah, we do. Actually, they're on page 33 of the packet. You can find both the parcel ID, the address, owners, as well as the legal description for each parcel within the boundary. What I would say is there are lots of actually subdivisions in here, and it's, I'd say, uncommon. There's some subdivisions that are only 2 lots. And so they're a subdivision that have their own plat. So that was a little, somewhat unique. I'd say we don't come across that often where a subdivision is only 2 relatively small size lots. So there are, a number of subdivisions within the study area. What I would say is, when planning and zoning are by the parcels themselves and really doesn't take into consideration, the nature of the subdivisions themselves. It's really the nature of the parcels, as well as essentially the creating a contiguous zoning district is aligned with a contiguous neighborhood. I do think that we do have that here with all the properties along each of these right-of-ways, whether it's, Ames, Basin View, Cub Court, Dolchek, and so on. It creates a contiguous neighborhood. And so this zoning map would update just each of these parcels to have a contiguous rural residential 1 district if that was eventually approved.
how many rural RR1 districts are there in the city of Kenai?
There are, I believe, 2 other existing areas, and again, they're contiguous, neighborhoods. and I believe this would be a third. So it's not a common neighborhood. There are two others, one on outer, I believe it's near Beaver Loop and the Spur. The other one being close to, I believe, the high school. So yeah, there's two existing RR1 contiguous zone neighborhoods.
So it wouldn't be out of line for me to say this is spot zoning. We're not even close to one of the RR1 residential areas. Spot zoning is thought as zoning not in accordance with a comprehensive plan. I understand there's not a comprehensive plan for the area. But for a mere private gain to favor or benefit a particular individual or group of individuals and not to the welfare of the community as a whole. That's how I see it. It's a spot zoning thing, okay?
Yeah, Mr. Foster, you can tackle that one.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, spot zoning, this wouldn't be a case of spot zoning. What we do have here is both RR1 and the rural residential are actually in the zoning code considered rural residential. They're both together. So spot zoning is usually when you have disparate zoning districts appearing within a neighborhood. So a good case would be if this, as it exists now, this entire study is rural residential. If maybe a handful of these parcels were to be a very different kind of use, like heavy industrial or general commercial, something that is very different than what we find here, as well as they're not being contiguous. I would say this is contiguous for these neighborhoods, and these neighborhoods based on, again, the rights of way for Ames Road, Basin View, Dolchek, and so on. And so it's really not a case of spot zoning. Spot zoning looks a little bit more, if sometimes they're referred to as like chicklet maps, that if you just took a bunch of chicklets and kind of dumped them out, that's what sort of spot zoning looks like. They're disparate. They don't have relationships to one another, as well as the relationships could be really different. Like here, both the rural residential and the rural residential one actually work very close and very well with one another.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, and I think this is a perfect example, that would be as if we took this and carved off Nick Miller's property, Nick's Ironworks, and made it general commercial in this subdivision. That would constitute a spot zoning scenario. So, anyone else have any questions for Mr. Eubank?
One other statement I have to make. My property is on Beaver Creek. When you rezone it and you limit the number of conditional use permits, that limits me to the number of people I can sell it to. Do I want to sell it? Someday, probably, okay? But when you limit me down the creek, not a quarter of a mile, okay? It's all guided properties, okay? There's conditional use permits for the whole thing down Beaver Creek, okay? So when you go in and you cherry pick where you're gonna put a conditional use permit, it's not right.
And that was a question I was going to ask you. I'm going to assume I know the answer now that you mentioned this, but so your biggest concern is that potentially it'll damage you financially when you go to sell it.
That's correct.
It'll limit the number of people and what the use can be used for.
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, when you put it, if a guy business comes in and puts in, it buys my property and puts in a conditional use permit, that doesn't mean he's going to get it. Let the system work. The system of conditional use permits and the covenants, I believe, covers exactly what we have to cover. So.
Very good.
Oh, yes, sir.
Quick, do you guys, I believe in that subdivision, do you have a current covenants restrictions, homeowners association, is that up to date?
That's correct. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Same thing, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Sure, my name is Charlotte Coots. I live at 385 Dolchek Lane, and I just wanted to say I am in full support of the rezoning. And it's interesting that the idea of covenants was brought up because last year when our neighborhood came to fight a conditional use permit that had been requested, some members of the city council kind of intimated that covenants are actually not even worth the paper they're written on. So the covenants do not protect us. And one of the problems we had talked about before, when we were trying to block some conditional use permits in our neighborhood, was that the conditional use permits that were down the road had not been, what's the word I'm looking for? There was no oversight. After the use permits had been granted, there was nobody to go back and check and make sure they were being used appropriately in the way that they were granted, and there were all sorts of problems that we had heard about that we did not want to happen in our neighborhood. So that's kind of the impetus behind this whole move right here, is to get things rezoned, because our covenants would not protect us because the city council was not recognizing them. And somebody even mentioned to us last year, well, what you need to do is get your neighborhood rezoned. So that is what we've done, and that is what our attempt here today is, specifically to protect the neighborhood the way it is right now, and to prevent people from out of town buying a residential home and turning it into a high traffic business right next to a family whose kids ride their bikes. When we take walks, walk our dogs, and it's the same thing that we talked about last year. We're just trying to preserve what is there right now. So if there are conditional use permits that have been granted in this area, obviously, as Mr. Foster was talking about, there is the ability for them to continue to have those uses even if the rezoning is approved. And so I am in support of the rezoning. I think our desire is that we just don't increase the amount of conditional use permits, that they are actually decreased. And so that is why we'd like this to be rezoned. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Vice Chair Dothett.
Like to comment on about the homeowners association, the covenants restrictions not being useful. That really comes up if you don't have an active homeowners association. I highly encourage you, if you guys are worried about that, to maintain an active homeowners association. Then your actual covenants restrictions have some teeth. It's where we get other subdivisions that come up that don't have active homeowners associations. There's no real teeth behind the covenants as there's no active homeowners association. So I just wanted to clarify that. Don't think your active homeowner association doesn't help you. It does, as long as you maintain it, and then your actual covenant restrictions mean something.
And we actually are in the process of doing that, so thanks.
Good. All right. See if anyone else before you walk away. Anyone else have any questions? She's walking. She's gone. All right. We lost her. All right. Next person.
Hello, good evening. My name is Frances Urick, and my address is 3065 Kim and Ange Court, Kenai. My husband and I support the resolution to rezone the Parcels and Basin View subdivision to rural residential 1. We moved to Kenai in 2019 for the quality of life in this quiet and peaceful neighborhood. We support the rezoning resolution, which will preserve the stability of our neighborhood for us, our neighbors, and future residents of this lovely area. That is all. Thank you.
All right. We'll see if anyone has any questions. Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person. You know the drill.
My name is Jim Richardson. I'm a 33 part-year resident at 1015 Angler Drive. I am not in this, I'm not included in this, but I understand the reason why it's there. So I'm speaking in support of this. You've seen the same group of people come out several times in the past couple of years because of concern with conditional use permits that are not working and not being enforced. And they have seen that not only do they cause disturbance and problems, but it's really, adjoining property owners and myself on both sides have tried for 4 years to deal with this, and we have made not very much progress. So they've watched this and are doing what they can to, 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 to try and deal with that situation. And it's not just the single permit that causes problems. The concept is being exported. I'm unfortunately at ground zero to the worst one, and he's exporting the idea of the circus tent to another property owner. So you're getting situations where last year you approved a conditional use permit and we're told that a person was doing this and it was going to be something, and now a different person is running it and they're ready to just put all sorts of things in there. So it's really, when I testified to you a few weeks ago, I said, try and be specific. In the case of the one that we were talking about recently, all he said was cabins, rental cabins and guides. Well, that doesn't help, because is it 2 guides? Is it 10 guides? Is it 15 cabins? Are they going to denude the whole property? And are you going to have a total of 10 people potentially, or 40 people? And also, I'd just like to take this opportunity. The neighborhood really thanks you and appreciates the decision that you made for 1025 Angler Drive to deny that permit. Now we have to go in front of the city and fight that issue again. I hope that they listen to what you have to say, but we're really grateful for your consideration and your decision. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Questions? All right, thank you. Next one. You'll never get a second chance. Come on. I'll tell you what, I have a question for Mr. Foster. I'm going to ask regarding the laydown, the photos in there. I'm wondering what are we supposed to take from those, and who provided those, if they'd like to explain that, whoever did. Wasn't much explanation to it, so I was just kind of curious if there's somebody.
Chair Twait, I would throw out there if I just provided what was emailed to me. I'll just say I'm not comfortable trying to interpret it.
Okay.
I would say if Mr. Coots was in attendance, could speak to it.
We got the boss lady. She can do it probably. Yeah, if you could come up, I should have asked, I guess.
Sorry, my husband, Peter Coots, lives at 385 Dilchuck Lane, and he is the one who submitted the photographs and an email saying very much what I have already expressed. And the photographs were instances after the owner of this property, who was trying to get a conditional use permit to run a fishing guide service and a lodge, was trying to say that he was going to be living there as a resident of our neighborhood, and that he would not have clients visit at his location. He would not have his clients' boats coming back and forth out of his property on the road. But these photographs were times when my husband drove by and actually saw clients waiting outside of his property for him, and he was not there. They were just waiting for an appointment, when he told us repeatedly in city council chambers he would only meet his clients at the river location and not run it out of his home. So I think that's what the supporting photographs were about. And they're kind of hard to see, but the photograph with the 3 men out in front, that is not the resident. Those are his guide clients that were waiting at his property to meet him, even though he had expressed multiple times he was never going to have any clients meet at his home. So that's kind of the stuff that we are expressing that we don't want to increase in our neighborhood. And so that's why he included those.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to give it one last shot. Anyone else wishing to come up and testify? I hope.
Name on the list. Sorry. I'm Mac Paget, 855 Ames. We were here a month or so ago. Same issue. We're taking your advice, moving forward with RR1, because we're going to fight conditional use permits. We are currently fighting conditional use permits. Our neighborhood is not all these subdivisions, it's Beaver Creek. That's why we live there, and the problem is bad. We're going to be back here talking to y'all again, I'm sure, and we will turn up. So I just wanted to go on record as being here, saying, I support this, and saying the conditional use permit has some serious problems, and we will continue to fight it, because we don't have a choice. We want to live on the Kenai River, but the only way we can get to the Kenai River is on Beaver Creek. That's why we're all friends, all neighbors.
Questions?
That's where we're surely going.
Anyone have any questions? You got one?
I don't think for this gentleman, but I would like to talk to the original.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a
Rusty.
shot to come back up here in a second. So, all right, thank you. Anyone else? Tough act to follow. Oh. She's going to tell you what you forgot to say.
Carol Paget, 855 Ames. My question is, we were here before about the conditional use permit that I think pictures were shown on, and where my confusion is Commissioner Douthit said that, you know, the covenants really make a difference. And I thought, gosh, you know, Basin View has got great covenants. But the last time we were here, it was Mr. Foster said, when I do my staff report, I ignore all covenants. Mine are looking at the guidelines of the conditional use permit. And so you approved it. You said, I recommend approving it, and then of course it went through and part of it was approved and it was appealed. So that's my question is, do you consider conditional in covenants at all? Because I understood you didn't.
So I'll take a little bit of the heat off you. Maybe I'll see. So technically, when you look at the criteria, that doesn't fall into the criteria that I believe he has to work off of. Mm-hmm. We do have, I guess I should say that some of the criteria in there now that has been adapted here recently is the economic and non-economic value, which is a part of what we as the commission can look at and make our decisions. So, and that I think carries a lot of weight now more than it did before, because we can look at it and say, okay, it's making the quality of life, you know, difficult. So I think that might answer most of it, but I'm going to let him finish that if he can.
Thank you, Chair Tway. Yeah, from staff's perspective, we use the city code that we currently have, and Title 14 being the zoning section of code. That's what we utilize for all of our process procedures and review with all these different types of zoning applications. In addition, we utilize the comprehensive plan as well. So these are the two main city documents. There's others, but that's primarily what the Planning and Zoning Department staff as well as commission utilize. What I would say when it comes to covenants is that it's not a part of my review of city code and the city's comprehensive plan. I'm not making a judgment call saying that they're unimportant or anything, but really what they are is their agreements between the private property owners. So it's a separate kind of legal agreement that a neighborhood of all these private property owners go into, where it's not my place to try and regulate these private property owners' agreements, and it's not a part of our code to try and do so, and it would be a slippery slope indeed if we tried to manage an HOA's CCRs for the entire city. We use the city's code, Title 14 planning and zoning ordinance, and then the comprehensive plan for all of the work and review that we do.
Vice Chair
Take
Dothert.
a bite of the pie on this one. If you think about it, the best way I can think of describing this is civil versus criminal. You kind of look at two different steps of the law, right? You've got we're looking at more like the criminal-like side with the city, and then there's the civil side, which is more of your covenants and restrictions. So that's more of where you would take it up on the civil side of things. So they're separated in that aspect. So if you have an active covenants and restrictions, meaning you have an active homeowners association, then you can pursue litigation in a more of a through a civil suit type of a thing versus what is in our code for per city. Maybe that can help make it, so that's where they kind of spread that difference there.
So with that said, I support changing the zoning because it sounds, again, it's not as clear as I'd like to see. Like, okay, we followed this, the homeowners, and you're not saying that that's entirely that. So I definitely support changing the zoning, making it clear for everybody.
I was going to ask everybody this, but I'm going to ask you, and you can answer for all of them. So we're going from 55 permitted uses in rural residential to 20. Or no,
it's actually,
conditional
potential
use.
conditional.
Potential conditional use. And I don't know if you looked at those specifically or if Mr. Huff did. My curiosity is, and I'm going to have this discussion when we close this, is that some of those 55 probably fit very comfortably in where the 20 are now. And I don't know the process of being able to manage those a little differently. I'm not talking about doing some of the things that we're really concerned about, but some of them, I'm worried about unintended consequences of thou shall not, and then all of a sudden we got a problem because it really does fit. So I'm just curious, would you be agreeable, I guess, if we started picking some of those and looking at it, or what is your opinion on that, or would you?
You know, I'm going to defer to Rusty.
Okay, absolutely.
So I think I'd be better off than answering, because
Okay.
I've looked at those, but not, I mean, the ones that jumped out, so I didn't go all line items.
Right, okay, yep.
Rusty,
Okay,
Mr. Huff.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify? All right, we'll let Mr. Huff come back up and finish up then.
You need my address and all that again, or?
Oh, yep, you know what? I'll let you go. I forgot we got people on Zoom. But go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead. No, you. Yep.
Okay, so a couple of things. You know, to me, monetary, value of property in dollars and cents is kind of debatable. I mean, some people think that the creek property is worth more money if a guy comes in and buys it and builds a lodge. I don't agree with that. I believe that the neighborhood we have up there and the value of those properties are way more valuable money-wise staying private, because that's why we bought them, because they were private. We go out there, we have the place where we live and we enjoy it. And so for that, I have to disagree with Mr. Eubank on that. Now, as far as, limiting him being able to sell his property to somebody that has the intentions of putting a business in a residential neighborhood, and that's what we're talking about here, a residential neighborhood, not a mixed commercial, not mixed anything. It's a residential neighborhood. So that's what I have to say about that. So as far as, what we're talking, the bottom line is our comprehensive plan. The number one priority is about livability and about the enjoyment of the value of the property in that respect. And so I believe that trumps some of these arguments that we've heard. But I am guilty of putting a sign on Dalchuck, or not on Dalchuck, but Ames. That's not in Basin View Subdivision. That is, and the reason I put that up there is because we do have two operators. One is a fishing guide, and one is a structural welding shop. And we have people that are always in a hurry to get down to the welding shop in the spring, and we have people that are on vacation going fishing. And so they tend to ignore the speed limit sign. So I put a sign up there to try to help protect, the kids on their bicycles from getting run down the street. So I'm guilty of doing that. Most of these permits, these conditional use permits, are based on city code. And I've looked at some of the city codes, and so it allows for all these opportunities for conditional use permits, and most of these I have no problem with. What I have a problem with is high volume, businesses like guide services, bed and breakfast in a residential neighborhood. I don't have a problem with guides. I know a lot of guides. Fact is, we have a guy and his wife own a house on Ames Road, and they've signed this petition. And we're all friends, we're all neighbors, but we're trying to protect this neighborhood as a residential neighborhood. And this is the only way I've found to help us keep it that way and try to keep us from having to come down here, you know, every 6 months or every 3 months and debate this issue. So I don't know what else I can do. This is basically, we're trying to draw a line in the sand with this whole area. And like I said, I've talked to almost everybody. Like I said, I put this in before some of the people were back in town. Mr. Ubeck is one of those folks, but and he's the only one I know that is opposed to this. So that's all I got.
All right, any Vice Chair Dothit's got his finger on the button.
So I do have a few questions as far as, if you go, I guess, I'm trying to figure out my correlation. I guess it would be the north of Ames. It appears there's a lot more people that have signed percentage-wise than there are if you go, I guess more of Dolchuk, I guess, north of Dolchuk versus south of Dolchuk. There's a large group of people running around those businesses that didn't sign on, and then toward the Beaver Loop side, it looks like there's another group of people that didn't sign on. Are those people you just didn't get signatures from, or are those people that said they weren't interested in it?
No, matter of fact, one of the gentlemen that testified here tonight owns 3 of those properties.
And are those properties that have residences on them, or just vacant lots?
No, just one, but he owns 3 properties. So.
Okay. That's us. Okay.
Okay, and then I talked to Nick Miller. He's, fighting cancer, so he wasn't able to sign it, but he told me he was okay with it. And then I think I have a couple more. I can't think of them right now, but I've talked to most of everybody in the neighborhood. And like I said, I could give you 10 more signatures tomorrow if that's what you want, but,
I'm just referring to, I guess, if the staff, on the back of the laydown here,
Right.
there was just a map, and that's where I was getting those
Yeah, I have it here.
from. Yeah, and the highlighted areas are the people that have signed.
I'll be honest with
and
you,
the
I started
highlighted are
this
not.
out with Dolchop.
Mhm.
And then it was recommended to me, it was suggested that, hey, let's just include this whole area. Let's just get it all done now. And I said, well, okay. So then I went and checked with my neighbors and all the people that were in town. And everybody seemed to agree that they wanted to include the whole neighborhood. So that's why I went ahead and went out as far as I did. Because it encompasses this whole block, see?
Yeah, it encompasses a large area, and that's why I was asking if,
Yeah.
because the boundary lines are flexible. So if we had a large cluster of people that were in favor and on one side and weren't on the other, that would consider possibility of adjusting these boundary lines to compensate for the larger group, and that's
Well, the
why
answer to
I
your
brought that up.
question is, it's all one neighborhood, and we could talk about subdivisions, but there's probably, there's some of those 2 lots as a subdivision.
Yes, I understand that. That's why it's not broken by subdivision. It's just.
Right, it's just, we just wanted to get this whole area in there, so.
And that's what my question was.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, not to go, I know it's got to stop somewhere, but did you consider the Juliuson properties in there, or it stopped before it got to there? And I'm just curious, because what's that?
It was considered, but I didn't go there because they just really aren't. They're just not really part of our neighborhood, to be honest with you. I'm just saying. They're there and everything, but we're not.
I don't know, in 2022, I don't know if you can say that, but, okay, yeah, I was.
Well, I get what you're saying there, but.
No, but I was just curious. Like I said, I didn't know if, it seemed like, because there's a chunk of them right next to that
Yeah.
would be easy to encompass.
I'm sure I could have went down there. I just, I did it that way because time was of an essence, and I just.
Okay.
I wanted to get Basin View. I wanted to get Dolchok. I wanted to get Ames, and I wanted to get Beaver Creek was my biggest focus.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? All right, looks like we're good. We'll check Zoom, see if there's anybody else wants to testify.
All right, now
There's a
we'll
hand
hear-
up.
Yep, Christine Schmidt, we see you have your hand raised.
Yes. I had the opportunity to participate in the development of this zone, and as I recall, this is a fairly new zone, so there wouldn't have been a lot of neighborhoods in it yet. It was intended to be more, and it took a long time to go through this. There were many, many meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council and work sessions and so forth. And every single one of those conditional use permits were discussed at length, whether to have them in or not. So I feel like trying to make changes at this point for this zone would be doing a disservice to all the hard work that went into creating it. And the intent of it was to protect the residential use zones and make them more protective of the residential uses than the RR zone from incompatible commercial uses. And then I just wanted to make a couple of comments about, so I hope you will support this petition. And having been involved in gathering these petitions in the past, I can tell you that first of all, you don't have to get everyone in the entire zone to sign on. It only requires 50 signatures. So once you get 50, you pretty much stop and put your petition in. That's what happened in the zone I was involved with, which is the one over by the high school. Secondly, the city's decision the city planning department's decision not to consider restrictive covenants is a policy decision. When I moved here in the 80s, through the 90s, the city planning department did in fact consider covenants. In fact, the planning, the conditional use permit application had a little line that asked if your subdivision or your neighborhood had if your property was had restrictive covenants. So it was a consideration. So I consider that simply a policy decision by the city that they don't want to consider that. But I think, like you pointed out, there could be a consideration of that in the new non-economic values, that language that you have in the code now. And one more thing I meant to bring up. Oh yes. So again, the fact that there's 55 potential conditional uses in the original RR zone versus 20 now was well thought out and debated at length. And I want to point out also that the RR zone is really old. It came from it's the original borough zone. And of course it has lots of conditional use permits in it because it was sort of a catch-all zone for everything. It's still the borough zone that covers the whole borough. So when the city took over zoning, they only had one zone, and this was it, for one residential zone, and this was it. So some of these other zones came along later with different restrictions or uses, but the RR zone is like basically the most least restrictive zone. So it's important that people that live in residential neighborhoods be able to have some choices when they live in a rural neighborhood like the one in question here. So I hope that you'll honor the wishes of the neighborhood to have a more protective zone. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
I just had one comment. As far as we're not looking to readjust RR1 in this, we're just looking to apply RR1 to another subdivision. I think that was brought up in the recent testimony just now, that it sounded like they were talking like we were trying to take out stuff out of RR1 or add stuff, and that's not the intention right now. The intention is we're just looking at this subdivision as moving into an RR1. I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, other than I was kind of thinking about it, so I did mention it kind of, so I think that's where she's coming from. All right, anyone else on Zoom that would like to testify? All right, looks like no more. We'll give one last shot. Anybody here in the room that would like to? If not, oh, I knew it.
MJ Loveland, 945 Ames Road, 1003 Angler.
I just wanted to clarify this blank, or Commissioner Dolphin, the blank area. Those people that didn't sign, they didn't sign because they weren't, that they were against it. They didn't sign because they were neutral. So, and 3 of the lots, Mac and Carol Pageant already said, they came up here and spoke and said, oh yeah, we're for it. And that's a huge chunk of the missing section right there on Ames Road. So, that's all I have to say.
All right.
And I'm for it.
All right. Anyone else? All right, we will close the public hearing then and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Vice Chair Dothett.
So a couple of the comments were made about what kind of businesses could be in here, and I just kind of was going through and looking, and I highlighted a few of the businesses because it was brought up about at-home businesses or possible bed and breakfasts. Maybe staff can clarify, maybe this I'm wrong, but it would still, RR1 would still allow a business / consumer services via CUP, marijuana cultivation, professional offices could still be in there. Bed and breakfasts would be a CUP, is that correct? And daycare centers, correct? Is that what C is meaning on this? Or is that not correct? Conditional use only. Marijuana cultivation facility limited is on there for conditional use. No, it says, look under RR1, marijuana cultivation would be conditional use. I'm not saying that there is, but I'm just saying that these are some things that still could be in there, right? So as far as being absolutely nothing allowed, I just wanted to bring it up because I think at-home businesses possibly could run under that business consumer services or professional offices, if that clarification on that stuff.
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Douthat. Yeah, so when it comes to, and it's kind of a broad term, at-home business, the code allows certain types of business without any type of, home occupation or conditional use permit. And so essentially, if somebody's just working from home with computer or phone, they don't have visitors, it's just something that they're doing remotely from like a home office or a kitchen table or something like that. In city code, you don't need to ask permission or get a permit for that type of use. There would be home occupations as well, section of code that would be allowed in the RR1, and then certainly reviewing the land use table, which starts on page 39 of the packet. The P's in the table, RR1, those are the principal permitted uses. Those are allowed. You don't have to ask permission for those uses. All of the C's that you find on the table do require the conditional use permit application as well as hearing process and a decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I see a conditional, I just was looking for clarification. Under daycare centers, it says conditional, but it's 29. Trying to figure out what you can clarify on that. Is that?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Douthat, that refers to footnote in the code.
Yeah, I see it. I just found it now.
Yeah, in that footnote, looks like use is allowed only for those parcels that abut the Kenai Spur Highway, and there's some additional regulations for that one.
Thank you.
So to clarify, just so we're clear, daycare centers show a footnote 29. That would not be allowed in the properties we're discussing, correct?
Chair Twit, yeah, that looks like that's the case. Use only allowed for those parcels that abut the Kenai Spur Highway, and none of these parcels do.
All right, so how about, and I know this is a relatively new zone, but Airbnbs and things of that nature are newer than RR1. Is there an opportunity for an Airbnb for short-term rentals? Or does that fall under cabin rentals?
think that's under bed and breakfast, I believe, what we looked at last time.
Chair Twait. So cabin rentals and the definition for that, and I'm paraphrasing in the code, it's a detached dwelling unit that would allow for renting for less than 30 days at a time. That would not be permitted in the RR1 district. As another use, bed and breakfast, there are a lot of uses in our code. I think maybe to clarify this a little bit, there are a lot of uses in the code that do allow what is broadly called short-term rentals, and that's less than 30 days or nightly rentals. We do have other types of uses, like bed and breakfast is just one example. Those are a conditional use in the RR1.
So an Airbnb or a couple of nights, do we look at that as a bed and breakfast, or how would we interpret that?
Chair Twit, yeah, bed and breakfasts also have a specified definition in the code. And again, without looking at that section of code, I don't want to kind of rattle off all the details on it. But the big difference between the bed and breakfast and a cabin rental is that the bed and breakfast does require an owner to be on the premises. Where cabin rentals, those don't require one, and so those could be more aligned with an Airbnb less than 30-day rental that somebody doesn't need to be on the premises for. That's probably the biggest difference between those two. I'm sure there's others, but I'd have to look into the code to provide some further analysis on it.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking that since it's not clearly defined in our land uses, that either we need to add another category or make sure we have it certainly understood in wherever it's at here, so that we make sure everybody knows what they're getting, so.
Yeah, I believe that's where.
Vice Chair Dothett.
On that, I think that's where, somewhere in between there, kind of falls in either more of a bed and breakfast if they live there, it's cabin rentals if they don't, so depending on this layout of the building, I think it could possibly fit into that as far as an Airbnb type situation. It was at least what we discussed at some of the last meetings.
So, and I forgot when we first started this, that what we're doing is certainly, we're just making a recommendation to council on this, so it's not like a public hearing where we're gonna make a adjudicative decision. We're just gonna go ahead and refer it on to the other powers that be. So just so we're clear on that. Vice Chair Dothett.
So based on that, I would really like to see some of these gaps filled in with knowing for sure people are in favor or against on the left-hand side of the subdivision. On the right-hand side, definitely large majority. I guess looking at the map, I think they have the support for it. I just like to see it clarified before, quite possibly before even maybe it goes before city council, if that's something they could make sure they have written response for that. If they do get the majority of both sides of this large lot, I would be in favor of it. As it is right now, just with the little unknowns, I could see possibly moving the boundary line over a little bit. But as far as RR1 versus R, I think with the majority of people in favor of it, if we had a few of those gaps filled in there or written testimony that they would be in favor of it too, I could see voting for it. But as recommendations go, I would like to see that for before it goes to council's vote, would be to see some of those bald spots filled in.
Commissioner Askin.
Based on the information provided and the number of people here, again, the same lovely faces we've seen how many times, I'm going to be voting in favor of this.
We want them to still come just to hang out, though, right, in the future. So, just so we're clear again, Mr. Foster, so what we're going to do, similar to the donation of the property earlier tonight, we're going to make a recommendation. This is scheduled to go to council yet, or is it not on their agenda yet. I mean, do we need to make a decision, move on it tonight, or do we have an opportunity to get some of what Mr. Dothett was looking for, and just wondering what the housekeeping looks like?
Yeah, Chair Tway. So this is not currently scheduled for the council hearing yet, but once the commission provides your recommendation, it would be scheduled for the next available one. As far as housekeeping, so the considerations again. So this is a resolution coming from the commission, but it is a resolution for a recommendation, and so time to time that. As opposed to making a decision and adjudicating via resolution, which is more typical. This is a resolution with that recommendation. What I would say is any consideration of recommendations could be placed within the as a section. There's in the packet there is a draft resolution available. So it could be that if there were any recommendations that you wanted to add and pass along to council, that would be the appropriate place to place that. And kind of the last kind of housekeeping item, because the commission is just making a recommendation and you're not adjudicating, that as opposed to an adjudicative session, if you did want to take a little bit more time with it, we could do an at ease and do essentially a very similar thing. But it would be an at ease as opposed to adjudicative session.
So can we call for an at ease for just a minute to talk about moving forward? Just to take 5
yep.
anyway.
Yep.
I think we're about ready to do that, and then we'll do the final vote.
Okay, we'll take back here at 9:38.
Very good. I'm gonna at ease to the western.
Okay. All right, we're going to go back on the record. Only 1 minute later than what we had anticipated. So looking for any other comments or questions or any other thing we'd like to discuss. Vice Chair Dothett.
I would just like to say that my vote will be tonight for this, and I would just encourage that before it goes to council, that if you have any other landowners, I know they've all been notified, but if you have any other support, they can get a letter of support for it. They can add it as a laid out item to the packet, and that might fill in any of those little questions. Even if you came in here and testified, if you haven't had a letter of support, it'd be something if they're not able to. For Nick, you know, he's fighting illness and stuff. Even if his wife or somebody can give a letter of support, just those look good for that. But I think as written, I think we have enough support for sure as far as code goes to pass it along. But I can always encourage, you'll have another week or a couple weeks before it goes to council. So any more letters of support you can as laid out items to fill some of those blanks in would be good. Thanks.
All right, anyone else? Commissioner Greenberg.
I think this is a good idea for this neighborhood. They've been very vocal about wanting to change and wanting to be a little bit more restrictive. I think that looking at the land use table would be a good idea to recognize that those uses will be judged based on their packet. So if there's a use that's in that zone, you're accepting that use. So that's something to consider. I know you've restricted the uses now, so that will help to protect the residential nature of the character. But, you know, if a good packet comes through, it's really the duty of the, any use that's permitted in that zone, it's really the duty of the commission to evaluate it based on the packet and not to reject it based on the use because those uses are permitted in that zone. But I will be in favor of this. I think it's a good move by the community in order to help to protect what they feel is valuable. Thank you.
Anyone else? Should have Commissioner Fikes do it as soon as she puts some candy in her mouth. No, you're good. Everybody good? All right. I'll just go on the record as quickly as saying, too, that I think, you know, it's unfortunate it's not 100% because I understand where Mr. Eubank's coming from 100%. And unfortunately, I can't hold it up, I don't think, because of just one for the greater good, unfortunately, and maybe between now and when it goes to council. So what it will do, just so everyone's clear, too, it will get forwarded on to council at their next convenient meeting. It could be as early as June 1st if we move it out of here tonight. And then there will be another public hearing, so everybody will have another chance to testify if they want to or need to, or you have anybody that couldn't make it tonight that wants to. So, but again, like I said, I will support it. It's the right way to approach this, and I'm glad that everybody kind of rallied together and came out tonight. Appreciate that. So again, I'll be in favor of it. And if no one else has any other comments, we will call the vote. It looks like we're ready.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes?
Yes.
Commissioner Askin?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dothett?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and no appeal period or anything like that. It's just a recommendation on to council, so pay attention to the council packets and you'll be able to show up again and testify if you wish. So, and I will, I guess, again, take a couple minutes at ease if you guys are all going to vacate out of here in a hurry. And let you.
I think they should all
do
stay.
that.
Thanks, guys. Jeff, maybe if we could get a desk over in the corner and you guys can go out there.
Memorial benches, maybe?
That's fine. I'll just wait for all you.
All right, we're going to go back on the record then. And we have moved all the way to I, pending items. We have none. J, reports. J1 is City Council. Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Twait. We had a City Council meeting on the 18th of May at 6 p.m. We had comments from Mr. Griffin, runs our golf course for us. They open up the 9th of May, and they're working on a golf team. They're concerned about the beetle kill. They're working with the city on that. And there's some bridges, some structures that are going to need some attention, some repair, and they're working with the city on that. And I'm sure it'll be resolved to everyone's satisfaction before it becomes a safety issue. We had an ordinance increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund for police department, accepting a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation passed through the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for traffic enforcement overtime expenditures. That passed unanimously. We had a ordinance for conditionally donating certain property owned for the Boys and Girls Club. And that was postponed till June 1, and we heard testimony tonight, and I'm sure we will hear follow-on testimony on June the 1st. Ordinance number 32882022. That was kind of neat. To accept and appropriate a scholarship from the Alaska Association of Municipal Clerks for employee travel and training for, ta-da! And this is money well spent. She's doing just a wonderful job with us, and we're just really appreciative. We passed a resolution authorizing an agreement for professional services to provide construction documents for a wastewater treatment plant digester blower. This has all the other equipment in this wastewater treatment plant. It's about 40 years old. There's parts are wearing out. They can't be fixed. We have to go to machine shop. Our maintenance crew fabricates as best they can. Some of the standby equipment is really not able to run to bring us to spec. So as a result, we are going to replace the digester blower with how can we say, more energy efficient, modern equipment that will run more efficiently. We passed a resolution authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund to provide supplemental funding for a communications tower, a condition assessment and capacity project. This tower is like 50 years old and it's just hung with stuff and everything is, I don't think it's a safety item, but we can't put another toothpick on it, and it needs to be looked at, and it will be brought up to modern standards so we can get more communications equipment attached to it. We authorized an agreement for professional professional engineering services to conduct a rate study for water, sewer, and wastewater utility study, and this happens every so often, and it's time now. We passed a resolution unanimously amending the employee classification plan by reclassifying the Public Works Transfer Treatment Plant foreman and water and sewer foreman positions. We combined these two positions so one person could run the water and the wastewater, and we adjusted the salary range for this class, and this would allow us to hire another person to work in the wastewater and the water production. He'll be cross-trained in both positions, and there'll be efficiencies associated with that. We passed a resolution of approving vacation of a 60-foot right-of-way and associated utility easements in Jane Subdivision's Big Mike Edition, and this is something that I believe I was here on the Planning and Zoning Commission. You approved it, went through the borough, and now it's back, and we approved the vacation. We adopted a resolution adopting the updated 2022 Kenai Peninsula Community Wildlife Protection Plan, and that is really something that's on everybody's plate. There's federal money coming down. The borough has some money, and of course, we have a fire-wise protocol in our city, and the spruce beetle, the endangered trees just have to come down, and we will be addressing that. We passed unanimously a resolution authorizing a budget transfer in the airport fund for payment of concession relief payments to terminal concessionaires from grant funds received through the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act. And those were adjudicated amongst the concessionaires that we have. And we passed unanimously a resolution authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund shop department for costs in excess of budgeted amounts. I'll just say something, you have a truck door that's damaged, you need to get another one. They're hard to come by, they're expensive, the price has gone up and everything. There wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to cover what we had, the shortfall in the budget for the remainder of the year. We had an action approval item for special use permit to Pacific Star Seafoods for aircraft parking and loading from June 1st to, and unloading from June 1st to July 31st. And that was it's a seasonal use, and they had one last year, and of course they did use it. We approved an amendment to an agreement for janitorial service with Reborn, again janitorial services, and I believe they service the airport. Action approval item, we approved the mayoral nominations for appointment to the Council on Aging and Mini Grants Committee. I didn't bring my packet with, I'm sorry, I did not write the names down. She'll bail me out.
The mini grant steering was the new.
Sorry. Let me just find it.
Okay, yeah, we, for Council on Aging and Mini Grant, and then I'll just hop ahead, we, go, yeah.
Alice Heckert and Michael Strawn were approved to Council on Aging, and then Brett Perry to the Mini Grant Steering Committee.
Okay, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't find their names. So, then we had a discussion to schedule a Board of Adjustment hearing, and we have one coming up here on the 31st, I believe, and several more following sequentially. And our next meeting will be June 1st, and that ends my comments. Any questions?
Any questions? I'll let you, I guess, opine here. It wasn't finished yet at your last meeting a week ago, but the budget was getting tuned up, and did everything that we wanted for the bluff stabilization get into the budget appropriately?
Here's what I know. A letter from our city manager, Paul Ostrander, highlighted this. In the budget that was passed by legislature in Juneau, I believe the $6.5 million was approved. It's sitting on the governor's desk, and so he has to approve the whole budget. Of course, he has line item authority, but I'm thinking.
Looks good.
It looks good.
Good.
Yeah, I have no reason to think it wouldn't be. I believe us and the Homer were the only two budget items of this type that were passed on for the peninsula.
It's an election year for him, so he probably will sign that.
Not for me.
Okay, we'll move on to J2 Borough Planning. Commissioner Fikes.
All righty, thank you, Chairman Twig. We had a meeting this May 23rd, and happy to say that out of 13, there was almost 8 of us in chambers, so it's nice to see a resuming, if you will, of the hybrid version and steering more to everybody participating in person, so that was nice to see. Let's see, I think we had 10 plats, all of the 10 plats, but one was approved. There was one that was postponed due to a code enforcement. The building was in a setback violation, so they had postponed that for some further research and review. And so, we had a section line easement vacation. for the Three Bears in the Sterling area. We had some discussion on that, and that was what was postponed. And then we had a conditional use permit for bank stabilization, and that was passed. That was for rock and steel barriers to be constructed for a home and a shop. That was what Mr. Glendenning was referring to. That was a homesteader down in the Kenai area here, down by the city docks, actually. So he petitioned the borough to get permission to construct some stabilization utilizing some giant steel pipes in addition to rock. He had lot owners on the right and the left that both had already done that, but he didn't, so the path of water obviously was going in towards him, so he was looking for permission to go ahead with that. It was discussed and ultimately passed, and then we went on to a conditional land use permit for material processing in the Moose Pass area, and this was discussed at length again because everybody knows how much we love gravel pits. And so this particular property was unique in the sense that there was a pocket of homeowners of about 20 homesteaders in the area that were concerned that this private property lot was quickly turned over to QAP so that they could stage equipment / now we're going to process / now we're going to turn it into rock crushing. So it sounded like it was an opportunity that came to them. They snatched it up, and then of course it came to us. So to some it looked like a curveball, but all the I's and T's were there, and so like I say, it fleshed out a lot of discussion on all sides, but ultimately it was passed. Some of the new considerations that they were volunteering up were no hours of operation beyond 8 p.m. They were unfortunately not able to put any restrictions on the asphalt. So in addition to rock crushing at that location, they're looking to do some asphalt, and DOT obviously gives you a green light here, gives you a green light there. It could be 6 a.m., it could be 6 p.m., so they didn't want to tie their hands with their business plan that way. So for rock crushing, I guess, they were able to keep some of the dust down. They had some vegetative barriers all the way around. And like I say, they were willing to limit their hours, so that was kind of where we were left with what we could do as a commission to kind of curb that to make it acceptable. And then we jumped into a public hearing to discuss some of the land for the upcoming land auction. And some of that request came out of the Moose Pass area, and they decided out of all the parcels presented that we would pull the two in Moose Pass for a 1-year delay so that they could look obviously at a local option zoning so that they could potentially prevent any gravel pits going into their area. So that was some of the discussion that resulted from that. And I think our final one was a resolution for classifying and reclassifying some of the borough land in the area. And again, some of it was reclassified, but again, it was also postponed so that that local option zoning, if that's what they choose, could be formed. And then we sunsetted for the evening. That's all I have at this time.
Any questions? I have one for you. My mom called me.
A nice young man?
She called me Jeffrey. No, my parents live on North Coho Loop. About halfway down between the beginning of the road at the Sterling Highway and their house is a big chunk of land. Looks like it's getting subdivided in there. State of Alaska DNR owns it from what I could find, and they were told that they were putting in a huge subdivision in there. That would come across the borough's plate, correct?
That would, and that would have been part of the topic for, we're also going to be revisiting the Anchor Point gravel pit, and that's close to Cocoa, obviously a little bit close, okay, maybe not. But that was not brought up as far as a plat or a subdivision that I recall hearing about, though. We did have 10 of them, but I'm familiar with the Coho area, and I don't recall that being one of them. Like I say, a lot of the vacant land was discussed for this sale took part from, all the way from Hope, all the way to Soldovia. There was all kinds of stuff in between. And then, like I say, another part of it was, discussion was talking about the vacant properties and pulling them out of state hands and pulling them out of borough hands and offering them up, and then what happens. Because as they say, in order to get them on the books to sell them, you must classify them, but once you sell them, anything goes. And so a lot of people, where there's a lot of back and forth on that, so. Yeah, hopefully answering your question.
Yeah,
no. I really don't recall Coho, because I'm familiar with it.
It's a 600-acre parcel, and it includes Crooked Creek and the whole thing in there. So I was just curious. So I don't know. I'll do some more digging. I've done my job. I did what she asked. So, all right, we'll move on to J3 Administration. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait. A few items of note. For the next meeting, June 8th, we do have a couple of items on the agenda. A town site historic development application, as well as a special use permit application for the Moose Meat John Cabin. I did want to give a brief update, status of the bowling alley. So that it still has the outstanding code violation for that. I've been in communication with the new and current owners, which is the bank, and they're keeping us informed on working on getting a buyer and closing on that. And so when I have more information on that, I'll share that with the commission. So yes, just still waiting to get updated by the bank. We do have the appeal hearing next Tuesday, the 31st. And there were some informational items. If you might recall from the last meeting, I gave you a brief synopsis on the waterfront project, public outreach. I did include in the packet the 2 PowerPoint presentations from those 2 evenings. And so I just encourage you, especially for folks who maybe didn't get an opportunity to attend either one of those meetings, to check those out, review them. I always, as a planner, to do that kind of long-range planning work is really fun. And I think we really saw that with the community and the ideas and the participation we had. I never thought that, going to graduate school would have that much like drawing in it or coloring and using markers and stuff like that. But it's actually really fun, and it's a very integral tool for that kind of project. And I'll just say, having great participation, and I think the consultant firm is doing a great job too on that one. That's everything I got.
Vice Chair Dothett.
Couple quick questions on that. On the meeting on the 31st, is that open to the public or is that a closed hearing?
No, it's public.
Public.
Yeah, yeah, we, sometimes, we go take an adjudicative recess and all that, but there's public testimony. Mr. Foster will be there to testify.
And then, as far as the bank and the violation, what's the violation? Just appearance of the building, or?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Dothett. Yeah, it's, and I'm paraphrasing. It was to the building, the fact that it was a public safety issue with that roof kind of sliding off of the structure. And so we did, I did speak with the bank, like I said, a number of times, just to be updated on what they're doing to address that violation. So they did put up some, they cordoned off that area to try and ensure that somebody who might be just cutting through the lot, doesn't get underneath that part of the structure. So it is a public safety violation due to the structure of the roof.
Do they have to show proof of insurance or something on that building because of that, something like that? If somebody were to get hurt, who would be held liable? The bank, I guess, on that?
Mr. Foster.
My assumption would be the property owner, yeah. At this point, it is on that property owner to resolve that issue. So we won't be
Do you have
dropping it until it gets resolved.
is there a timeline we set for them, or just?
Yes, though there's been a little bit of there was a change in ownership from when we originally cited the property owner. It went into foreclosure, and then with that, the bank took ownership of it. They still are the owners, and they've kept us informed on what they were currently doing, as well as looking to do to get a new owner who would be doing the final, what I'd say the final remedying of the violation.
We just put a lien on it for the city and tell them to give it to us, or that'd be something they'd have to do to get it fixed?
So I guess the question would be, is there a structure to fine them for that at some point in time if they just continue to let it go until winter comes again?
Chair Truitt, yeah, that's a possibility. If what I would say is a typical code violation process where it gets to that stage would be if we're just ignored or stonewalled. What I would say is we've been in contact with the owner, and they've been, I think, forthright about what they've done and are trying to do to resolve it. So we can continue that communication with them. It can't go on, forever unresolved.
Yeah.
So I'd say if they were, if the sale didn't go through, we'd be having another different conversation with the bank as property owners.
Gotcha. Commissioner Askin.
Do we know what bank is it? Is it a local bank?
Mr. Foster.
Yeah, through the chair. And I don't know off the top of my head the full name of it. I want to say New Vision was the name of it. And I do believe they had a local branch maybe.
It's the credit union in Walmart.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Foster? All right, additional public comment? No. All right. Informational items, I think Mr. Foster touched on that. If you want to zip through that, our next meeting, June 8th. Commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Woodard.
I'm good.
All right. Commissioner Askin.
I don't have anything, thanks.
All right. Commissioner Greenberg.
I don't have anything.
Commissioner Fikes.
All good, thanks.
Vice Chair Dothett.
I'm good. Sorry for the long-winded testimony with the Boys and Girls Club stuff. I had received multiple calls and comments from both sides of this subject, so I was just trying to come up with a mutually beneficial solution, and appreciate you guys feeding on there, just as a long, drawn-out drama the last few weeks.
And I have just one thing I'm going to say, and that is, in light of what happened in Texas yesterday, I would like, if you have the time, to write a letter to the school board. We need to fix how we go in and out of these schools. We need to have one point of entrance and a airlock in there and do something. It's long overdue, and it's going to continue happening until we deal with it. So, school boards, next thing still got COVID money they can probably spend, and they got a big fat budget from the state. So, this is the time to fix those things. And with that, business complete. The meeting's adjourned.